Now to the business report with Joel Crosskill.
Lots to share with you in the business report today. Emerging from the keynote session, Education for All, creating inclusive, gender-responsive and learner-centered systems in education at the regional symposium held in the Cayman Islands, where Dr. Verna Knight, coordinator for the Eastern Caribbean Joint Board of Teacher Education at the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus, shared this paradigm-shifting quote.
In many classrooms across developing countries, 1/3 of our students are known to be physically present, but disengaged from learning. They are in school, but achieving no greater academic success than the child who is out of school.
As at November 2024, almost 700,000 Jamaicans are considered to be outside the labor force, approximately 60% of which are women. However, the BR today is focused on the dynamics impacting males, as experts call for targeted mentorship to address the widening education gap in the Caribbean. Mr. Lanray Chin, mentorship officer at the Jamaica Teaching Council, describes some of the factors impacting the disparity in outcomes between genders.
Maybe 30, 40 years ago, it was about girls' education. Now we're having a crisis in terms of boys' education, and yet some of the donor agencies are still pushing a girl agenda without actually addressing the fact that now the boys have become disenfranchised. In Jamaica, education is widely seen as both a social and economic driver. The country invests heavily in the sector, with about 6% of GDP going towards education. If you break it down more in a more granular way, about 20% of our national budget is directed towards education. But yet, despite all of this funding, there is a challenge, a disengagement, particularly among the boys.
With approximately 1,000 boys incarcerated annually in Jamaica, the disengagement, he says, leads to a significant wastage of human resources, citing barriers that hinder better outcomes among the male school-aged population.
The absence of male role models. When my father was at school many decades ago, most of his teachers were male, right? So he had what we call living examples of who a male is supposed to be. What is your role? What is your function? Only around 20% of the teachers in Jamaica are actually males. And when you look at the higher level institutions, the colleges and universities, only around 25 to 30% of those that enter the school are males. And let us not talk about the matriculation aspect of it. How many of those actually come out with degrees?
The JTC mentorship officer, however, noted a significant shift in the hiring philosophies of major corporations, partially in response to the phenomenon that places less emphasis on accreditation as a potential avenue for increased male participation.
If you examine companies like Google, they are moving towards a more competency-based approach in terms of employment. So there's less interest in paper qualifications, because a lot of times you have persons with paper qualifications but no ideas and no sense, right? So we have to move towards a competency approach. The shift opens up new possibilities for education to re-engage boys. Instead of solely focusing on academic performance, the system can pivot towards more practical skills. We're in an environment with several needs. Now the system should be creating entrepreneurs, not workers. So the mindset of the boys needs to be shifted, and this is why they're not being engaged.
One of the responses that have been trialed to meet those changes is the implementation of income-generating projects through entrepreneurship programs in schools.
Let me give you some examples of what the boys have done. A lot of the high schools do farming projects. So what we do, we provide them with seed money, and we get groups of boys to come together to start a small business. So some of them have done farming. They go to do the farming and they sell the produce and they take the profit for themselves. So when we give them the seed money, we don't ask back for anything more than reports, and we monitor them. And we realize from the reports that some of the teachers have made that some of these boys that have engaged in the program, it has changed them from an academic perspective. One particular teacher, one in the school, said that this particular boy did no subjects in school. But once he started engaging in the entrepreneurship program, it gave him a degree of motivation to start taking his subjects seriously. right? So we'll find that it actually helps to give them a sense of purpose, the entrepreneurship system.
Chin, however, also points to an uncomfortable truth that he suggests prevents other young men from following a similar pathway.
A number of our boys, because of the circumstances of their families, are forced to work. If I look back at the COVID-19 pandemic, as a teacher, I remember that a number of the boys had stopped engaging in the online platform. And the reason is that a number of them were working part-time to help support the family.
Social pressures for young men to prematurely become breadwinners is also compounded in the digital age, as suggested by Darren Carter, a gender equality professional at the Caribbean Development Bank, who posed the following to the panel in the form of a question that the BR hopes its audience is willing to consider.
Men tend to express their masculinity in ways that objectify their masculinity. So how much money you make, what clothes you wear, and this is all the true for boys. This isn't like anecdotal evidence, it's very backed by sociological principles and research. And I guess my question is, how do we reconcile meeting boys where they're at? Via initiative, for example, cited by the Boys Entrepreneurship Program, which I, again, commend you on, while simultaneously instilling in them that to some extent education is about delayed gratification, sacrifice now for benefit later. And I think that is in woefully short supply these days. The advent of social media, comparisons, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess your reflections on that.
And that was your business report. I'm Joel Crosskill.